Before we begin, we have several departments here, right? Majority of them, I'm sure. Departments, I've seen some of the stuff in there. Well, I guess I've heard stuff. Anybody in here not heard the rumor that Senator Black and the Appropriations Committee in the Senate anticipate putting in priority-based funding model and try to begin this year? I think you looked that way, but I think you knew that I was going to do it. It's stuff that started in law in 2003, and we've been doing it. So everybody with frowns on your face, my understanding historically is what has went on in our books for the last, since 2003 after, has been a focus on going that direction. And as somebody that's sat on this committee for 9 years, starting my 10th year, helping move that a little bit farther along will be helpful, especially if we do have to go through tough times that looks like we may have to do again in our state that hasn't happened in quite a while. So as somebody that's made, I'm the only person up here probably that's made gobs of mistakes in my life, making decisions, spending money. My wife still reminds me of a couple of those that started back in the 80s. That's not what the proposal is. It is getting all of us hopefully on the same page to try to go forward. And I think about it as a teacher that was taught to have objectives when I started school. Maybe one person in here knows what I'm talking about. Those objectives meant nothing. I would write them up on the board, make kids put them in their notebook, and they would say, we're going to learn about animal reproduction. We're going to learn this. But they had nothing measurable in those goals. And then sometime after I'd been a teacher for about 15, 18 years, some idiot, not in the government, but somewhere decided we needed SMART goals. And those goals had to be measurable, had to have time associated with them, etc. And it wasn't the idea that all of a sudden this guy didn't know what he was doing, or nobody was saying I was doing anything wrong, even though I felt like it a time or two. It was the idea, if these are the things that you're going to teach, how many people do you plan on learning it? What time frame do you think it'll need to be in, etc. And that's what I'm going through. All of us sitting here and all of you know sitting there, there are things that we do because we have to, right? Legislatively, we have to do it. It is just trying to get, I hope, get our government moving to a different direction and to help you, the decision makers out there in the departments, to help you make better decisions. Honestly, that is what it is. Because I think in the military, what do they have? One supervisor for every 3 people? And we can't afford to do that. So that those of you out there making decisions for a big group, I see this as a positive and certainly not a stick in any way. So you're going to start seeing questions about new decision items. I've looked at them time and time again. 90% of it's not going to be new. It's stuff that you've figured out. Probably most time, but just somebody like me doesn't get to see it. And I hope that you will embrace it with the way that I've brought it in front of you. Okay? Dan, with that, it's turned over to you. Let's hear all the good news, and then I've got a few questions about supplemental staff's helped me with that I think are important, because some of these questions even talk about next year and the year after that, what direction we're headed on some of this spending. So I'll be quiet and please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Dan Hogg, State Budget Director. I know I talked to you, and I think just really briefly want to publicly address the error I made in the budget that sort of came out yesterday. I made an error on our balance sheet. I double counted the disaster spending and the Senate Bill 1 spending. This error changes our ending general revenue balance $4.7 million, which is what we talked about when I was here I think, last Wednesday. And now it is $265.7 million. So it was a $261 million error. This was my mistake. I take full responsibility for it. I'm very embarrassed that I let this happen. But I wanted to come here and publicly admit it to you. I want to explain it to you. This is not an excuse. This is an explanation. I think the committee deserves to know how it happened, but this is not an excuse. There is nothing here that is excusing that this should have happened. This should have never happened. It's my responsibility to make sure that the budget that the governor presents to you is accurate, and unfortunately this year it wasn't. And so, again, it's my responsibility and mine alone. But I want to explain what happened so that you guys understand it. We are certainly taking a hard look at this and are looking to change our processes and other things to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I will work even harder to make sure it doesn't happen again. But basically what happened is when we're putting the budget together near the beginning of the budget process, we have our balance sheet, which sort of gives us where we are on general revenue. I made a manual adjustment for the spending, the disaster spending, and the Senate Bill 1 spending. The Senate Bill 1 spending is $50 million for the MU reactor and $25 million that we put into the Missouri Housing Development Authority for those grants and loans to help the people in St. Louis. Those were not in our system in the FY26 appropriation numbers because they were in special session. So I made a manual adjustment to make sure that those were accounted for. As we get towards the end of the process, all of that then, it's going to also be spent in FY27, so it gets put into the mover system as part of the FY27 numbers. We then input the spending we get out of movers, and let me say this really quick. This has nothing to do with whether movers worked right or wrong. Movers did its job in this. So this is not, I know that's a little bit of a hot button topic, but this is not anything that is movers' fault. So we took the information out of there. I put it into our balance sheet. It spits out the numbers and ultimately comes out with $4.7 million ending balance. Well, what I neglected to do, and what I should have done and should have double-checked, triple-checked more, is I did not undo that manual adjustment that I made. And so basically the numbers we had in there were double counting the spending for the disaster spending and the Senate Bill 1 spending. And that's $261 million. So that's how our ending balance goes from $4.7 million to $265.7 million. But like I said, we are looking at our processes and that. I do want to give publicly credit to Glenn Fitzgerald in the House. He's the one at the end of last week said, hey, these numbers don't look right. That's one of the reasons that we are very, we share our numbers with House and Senate staff. I think the more smart people like Glenn and Adam looking at it is better. I mean, ultimately, we want the right numbers for this process. And Glenn said, hey, this doesn't look right. So we went back and looked at, sort of dug into the backup numbers and all that goes into what our balance sheet spits out. And we looked at it 2-3 times and said, yeah, no, this isn't right. I immediately went to the governor and said that. It was late last week. With the holiday on Monday, we then talked to the Senator Black and Representative Deaton, the respective chairs, and let them know. And then yesterday in the House hearing, I made it public. Wanted to give this committee the same opportunity to ask questions about this. I will say, while $261 million is not an insignificant amount of money, I don't think this changes significantly the budget picture. This was one-time spending, so this changes our one-time numbers. And as I spoke in this committee last week, the real issue with our budget right now is that our ongoing expenditures are more than our ongoing revenues. This error did not change either of those numbers. Those are still where they were when I talked to you last week. So we still have the same issues that this budget is taking the first step to address, but there will be additional steps needed to address that in the FY28 and possibly FY29 budget. I will say that while having this additional money on the bottom line gives us a little extra cushion in case something unforeseen happens, revenues don't come in as expected or something like that. If this additional $261 million, due to my error that is now available, is spent on ongoing items, that will make the FY28 budget even worse. You will have a bigger hole to deal with if you take this money and spend it on ongoing items. So we are asking that this money be left on the bottom line is a little bit more cushion. It'll certainly help me sleep better at night versus $4.7 million on the bottom line. And so we are asking that this money not be spent. I think when the governor crafted his budget, it was with an eye towards that ongoing issue, not with the really the one time. So in speaking with him, this wouldn't have changed the amount of spending that we recommended. We think the amount of spending that we recommended in the budget is the right amount of spending for this year. We know that amount of spending is going to have to be less going forward. And so that's where we're at on this. And so wanted to make sure that we sort of also communicated our position since, the facts have changed. So that's what I have. Again, I just want to apologize to this committee. It's my job to make sure that there's accurate numbers for the state budget, that so you guys can make good decisions based on accurate numbers. I failed to do that this year. I'm extremely embarrassed about this, but I wanted to publicly take responsibility for this and let you know that I will work even harder to make sure it doesn't happen again. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about this. Thank you, Senator. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards if you want me to, Senator. Senator, if you want, I'll start going through the supplemental items.
We're ready.
Again, just before I start, we talked about this a little bit when I did the overview last week. We are asking that the supplemental move quicker this year because of some of the World Cup issues, because we expect some federal disaster money that's owed us since COVID to come in, and we have a very short time frame to get those dispersed. So I'll hit those specific items, but we think we need the supplemental passed by March 15th. I know the House, I think, is going to work on moving it quickly. They had a hearing just the other day, so I think this is moving. So just wanted to preface that before I get into the specific items. So in page 1 is some Medicaid spending authority in DESE. We were able to get some Medicaid match on some of the services we provide, especially to the state schools for the handicapped. And so we need some federal authority to be able to spend that money when we get it. Page 3 is the Safe Schools Act. This is Senate Bill 68, sponsored by Senator Henderson. This requires the local education agencies to report all school safety incidents and credible safety threats. This is for the creation and maintenance of a database of those incidents and credible threats. I probably should have said at the beginning, we're really not starting very many, almost no new things in here. This is just things that have come up that we do. But there are a few things that we think are very important that need to get started as soon as possible. And obviously, the school safety is something that we think is extremely important. And so we want to put it in the supplemental so we can get started on that as quickly as possible. Page 5, Office of Quality Schools. This is $320,000 of a grant. This is their federal and other funds line. It says federal, but this is actually a grant from the Walton Foundation. And this will help DESE evaluate accountability metrics. And so this is $320,000 for a grant from the Walton Foundation. Page 7, this is just some additional federal funds that will flow to us through our Perkins grant, which is career education. If you look on tab 9, there's some additional information on the Perkins grant and how much we receive. Page 10 is the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. This is $3.2 million from the federal government. This is a grant to create a comprehensive literacy program and to advance literacy skills, including pre-literacy skills, reading and writing for children from birth through grade 12. Page 12 is some federal funds to help with homeless students. This is providing transportation and educations to students experiencing homelessness. This is $951,000. You can see on tab 15 some of the detail behind that. Tab 16, this is the School Turnaround Act transfer. This is funding that will go to Riverview Gardens. This completes the program at Riverview Gardens, and at this point there are no other schools with taking advantage of the School Turnaround Act. Page 20, vocational rehabilitation. This prepares high school age and adults with disabilities to participate in the workforce. This is $2.2 million GR, but it does draw down $8.2 million of federal funds.
Dan, before you move on, this won't, my guess this won't be an answer you have. I get somebody from DESI, but number of people on a wait list on voc rehab now. I haven't had anybody contacting me at my office recently, so my guess is that there's probably not anybody waiting for any approval.
I don't know.
But if you can get somebody to let me
if there's
know
nobody here
that.
that can answer that, we will get that information and give it to you in the full committee. But we can get that information for you.
Okay.
Oh, Pam.
Pam Victor, Chief Budget Officer at DESI. Yes, there is a wait list, and they are working their way through getting people off of that wait list. And this funding will help us finish addressing that.
Okay. Do you know, for some reason, what the wait list number is now?
I do not know the exact number right now. I want to say 1,200, but I'm not sure that I'm giving you the right number. So let me get you the most up-to-date number
Okay.
on that one.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, does this have to be a match? Sorry, I haven't read all the description. So, obviously, the department requested more, asking for essentially 3.2 GR and 11.8 Fed. Do you have to have a GR match for this?
Yes, we do have to have some GR match with this, and the recommendation split that they have it
Okay.
in the governor's recommendation will work.
Okay. And then with this, are you expected, with this, if this supplemental request is passed, are you expected to be able to draw down that wait list, or would there still be a wait list remaining?
I believe this addresses the wait list.
Okay. Yeah, let us know. Just fall back to this.
Timing, of course, is important on getting the wait list through, but with an early, if the supplemental is out on March 15th, that gives sufficient time to then spend these funds and get those folks off the wait list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Page 23 is some additional information about voc rehabilitation. And also page 24 also has some additional information about vocational rehabilitation. Page 25 is the federal IDEA grant. This is a allocated formula to school districts for supplementing the cost of educating students with disabilities is the biggest part. There's some in there for admin and a little bit else. So that is $20 million federal funds. Page 27 shows some additional information on the IDEA grant. Page 28 is the High Need Fund. This is $14 million. The High Need Fund is the state by statute is responsible for paying for the education of any student that the cost of educating them is 3 times more than the cost of educating a student through the formula. So these are the really expensive kids that need quite a bit of help. So we have a $14 million supplemental here. You can see on page 30 some additional information on that. You can see that the costs are going up pretty significantly. We have asked DESI to look into what's going on with these costs going up so dramatically and the increase in students on this one and the next one. They're very big, expensive items. And so we just want to understand what's going on and make sure that our money is being spent efficiently.
Yeah, Dan, after we talked, I went home, discussed this also at home. Haven't we closed some of our state schools, so that could have an impact where in some places on this high needs funds. Possible. I know you, Dusty's looking into that. You stated that. And you discussed openly that these two things that you just went through, it's quite a bit out of the ordinary
Yeah, these are-
on supplemental. And when you were discussing that with me, it wasn't like we did something in this budget year when we were passing this budget that took money away from these. So it
Yeah.
is a
This is-
increase that
this
we
is
need
true.
to understand whether this is going to last like this forever, these kind of increases, or whether we've had this one bump in the road financially and then it's going to level back out, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty significant growth. This is all general revenue funded, so obviously, we want to understand what's going on. We want to make sure that we're funding the right amount, that provides the services to every kid, but we want to make sure it's the right amount.
And this early childhood special ed,
Yeah, on
there's
page-
been court cases around this as
Yeah.
well as other things in our state that we've promoted early childhood in schools
Yeah.
that are driving this.
Yeah, so as the chairman said, page 31 is early childhood special ed. This is a $35 million supplemental. This is by court case in 1992. The state is responsible for this funding. And so, this is a supplemental. This is a very large amount here. So again, we're asking Desi to try to help us understand what's going on, because this is a significant portion of our budget here to fund these. But again, we want to make sure everything that needs to be funded is funded, but we just want to make sure that we understand what we're funding. Page 33. This is, so page 33, there was just a coding error, and so if you go to page 35, that is where we actually fund it. So this shows 0 on 33 as the GovRec. We're actually funding it, same exact item on 35. It was just a coding issue, and so we ended up having to say 0 to the first one. So this is Federal Spending Authority. This is funds, now we're in Department of Higher Ed, that we received to help with some of the workforce issues due to some of the natural disasters that happened in our state. $4.3 million. Page 37, now we're in Department of Revenue. This is some increased material costs and other costs for our license plates. This is highway funds. Page 39 is refunds. So this is tax refunds. Based on the consensus revenue estimate, this is the number that we think tax refunds will be. I would take a second here to talk about something that we're going to do in this budget that hasn't been proposed in a budget for a long time. A lot of people here may not even remember or know what it is. We're going to ask for, in the FY27 budget, an estimated appropriation. So put an E on it. And that has Auditor Fitzpatrick, when he was the chair in the House, took all the E's off of that. But an E lets us spend whatever the amount is we need to spend that. And we're going to ask for it in two places in the budget. One is tax refunds. I don't think any of us want to have to delay somebody's tax refund because we ran out of appropriation authority and have to wait till after July 1st of the next fiscal year to pay them because we ran out of appropriation authority. And obviously, we do our best to forecast that, but it's not an exact science. So we used to have an E on this line, and so let's say with this, we added this $225 million, but let's say it ultimately ended up being $230 million. Under the current system, those extra $5 million would have to wait until we had appropriation authority, which would be after the new fiscal year started on July 1st. So some people would have to wait. And possibly, depending on when we ran out of appropriate authority, the state might have to pay interest on that. So what we are asking for is an E, an estimated appropriation that would say, well, we can pay whatever the cost is. We'd pay that right away and get the payments out to our citizens. I think previously, and I think one of the reasons at the time Representative Fitzpatrick took the E's off is because we probably got a little lazy with them. We put them in too many places. The other thing I think we got lazy with was instead of every year updating the number to where it should be, we just leave it where it was because we knew we had the E and could pay what it was. But I think the budget should try to reflect what we think the spending is. So I think it's our commitment to you guys, to you, if you put that estimated appropriation on there, every year we'll come back and say, this is what we think it's going to be. This is our best guess. But, you know, it's still an estimate. We still don't know exactly, and we don't want to delay refunds for our taxpayers. So the governor made the decision that we would ask for an E here and also on our federal disaster line, only the federal part. But we want to know, because typically we only have 30 days to get that money out. And we've had to actually ask this federal government to slow down a little bit on spending us about $300 million of COVID money from that disaster because we didn't have the appropriation authority. So those are the two lines. Wanted to have a quick discussion on that with you guys on here. But we do think in a very limited capacity that E's can make our budget more efficient. Page 41 is the park sales transfer. This is just the parks reimbursing some of the cost of its collection. This is just based on how much that sales tax collected. So the sales tax collected a little more than we thought. So there's a little more cost of collections that it reimburses to GR. Page 43 is the exact same thing except for the soil and water sales tax. Page 45 is the Amendment 3 transfer. This is Amendment 3 from like 20 years ago, not the Amendment 3s that we've dealt with here recently. What that said is that the highway fund, it pays either the actual cost of collection or 3% of revenues, whichever is less. And so what happens then is if that whatever's less doesn't cover the full cost of collections, GR has to then pick that up by constitution. So what we do every year is sort of settle up in the supplemental, and so this is the amount that GR is going to have to pick up to help collect highway funds. Page 47 are lottery vendor payments, $1 million, $85,000 for lottery payments. These are just payments to our vendors. These fluctuate as the sales are. These are payments based on sales. Page 49 then is the other item associated with that, same thing. Page 51, now we're into the state road fund. This is another item where we're asking for the supplemental to be passed quickly. If you remember last year, there was a bill to create the federal state road fund, which then our federal money would be deposited into there instead of into the state road fund. And in the budget, we cut out some of the state road fund spending authority and replaced it with this new federal state road fund spending authority. Well, that bill did not pass, and so basically we are short of state road fund authority. So basically what we're doing is we are going back in and just putting back in the same amount of spending authority that was removed and moved over to that federal fund. And so this just makes them whole. But my understanding from the department is that they are concerned that they might run out of authority sometime in the spring, and so we don't want that to happen. So this is another reason we're asking that the supplemental be moved pretty quickly. So that is page 51. And so this is in each of their divisions. So 59 is the same thing. 74 is also the same issue. And then we get to page 85. This is a $25,000 grant from Walmart for the St. Louis America 250 celebration. Page 87. So now we are into Office of Administration. This is some funding to help us replace the electronic health records for our veterans' homes. Page 90 is the utility increase of $2.4 million. You'll also see this later on in the book because the way we do utilities, you have a transfer from House Bill 5 into House Bill 13 where we actually pay it. So because in the supplemental, we'll need to adjust both of those lines. So that's what you're seeing here. You'll see it later. Page 93, this is an increase for security at our state locations. This will be contracted security professionals to help make sure that our state office buildings are safe, both for our state employees and any citizens that need to visit there to conduct business. This is $2.3 million. This is a new program. We're starting it in the supplemental. One of the few things we're starting new in the supplemental because we do think it's important that we make sure that both our state employees and our citizens that come to our state office buildings are safe. Again, this is like the utilities. You'll see it again in the back of this book.
Can you explain, feel like you can explain to us any of what this enhancement's going to provide?
So this will provide basically contracted personnel to be at the some of our state office buildings. Not all of them. There are specific ones that have issues with both property crime and unfortunately sometimes assaults, especially in some of the parking structures and things like that. So we feel like we need to have professional armed security to help, again, keep not only our state employees safe as they go to their cars and things like that, but also the people who are parking there and coming in to conduct business with the state, whatever that may be. So that is what we're asking for here. Page 95 is some funding for Solicitor General space, $17,000. There was a new staff approved in the FY26 budget, and so this is some space for them. Here's some space for the State Treasurer's Office, $24,500. Page 99 is some money to lease some parking spaces at the Fletcher Daniels State Office Building in Kansas City. Unfortunately, the parking garage there has some structural issues, and we are not able to use the first level because of those structural issues. We are looking at what other options we may have with that garage, but it's an older garage, you know, getting close to the, you know, end of its useful life. So right now, though, this is 40 spots that we no longer can use in that garage that we're now contracting for to be able to provide those parking spots. Page 101, our bond counsel has indicated that the language that we put in the budget last year for the state fair bonds, this is for the stalling barns and those kind of things to go along with the new arena, they don't feel that it's adequate, so bond counsel has asked us to adjust that language. So they've given us what they think the correct language would be. We're going to change that language in the supplemental, so for FY26, and you'll see it also changed in the FY27 budget. But at this point, we're not able to go to market and offer those bonds because of bond counsel's concern with our language.
I do, Dan, want somebody, you're not the first person that has told me this, so I would like to have somebody come tell me what the change was.
Yeah, we can talk to you.
Not to do anything other than so that I understand why it needed to happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have Stacy Neal, who's our Director of Accounting, with us and is our bond expert. The OA is having their hearing in the House right now, so she's over there for that. But I will have her, we can come see you and talk to you about it. Or if you prefer, I know she could answer it when OA comes in front of you here next week or whenever that is.
Yeah, tell Stacy do that.
Okay, I'll give her a heads up that you may ask her that in the hearing. So I'm assuming she's going to get asked that today down in the House, so she ought to be prepared. Page 103. This is something you see in the supplemental every year. It has to do a little bit with the E issue we used to that I talked to you about before with the refunds. So by Constitution, we are required to transfer into our budget reserve fund 7.5%. It has to be sitting at 7.5% of our previous year's collections by July 15th of the fiscal year. So if we collect a little bit more than we thought, we've got to put some more money in there to get it to that 7.5% item. And we have to do it by July 15th. So, but we don't know what that is because the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So we used to have an E on this transfer because we didn't know what it was and we had to do it. That E was taken off, and to deal with that situation, what we did in the budget is we put flexibility from the spending authority in some of our benefit lines, so we can use that spending authority, that appropriation authority, to get the budget reserve fund where it needs to be, but that lowers the amount of spending authority that some of our benefit lines have. And so what we do then in the supplemental is we come in and ask you for additional spending authority in those lines to make up for that. No more money is being spent. This is all just about authority. And so what you'll see over the next couple of pages is we took some spending authority from our OAS DHI transfers that are in our benefits line. If you look on page 106, we took a little of the spending authority from Mosier's of $2.8 million. And then if you skip 109, because that is not part of this, and go to 111, that is where we took some of the appropriation authority from our Missouri Consolidated Healthcare Plan to make this transfer to the Budget Reserve Fund. We are just making them whole. These are very small amounts. They wouldn't need this until the very end of the fiscal year. These are big lines, but we do want to make them whole on this. So that's what we're doing on those three lines. If you then want to go back to page 109, this is $10 million for Missouri Consolidated Healthcare Plan. This is the estimate of what we think we're going to need to make sure that we can pay out all the claims for the people covered by that plan, which is basically state employees and their kids and spouses and those kind of things. As we're seeing with Medicaid and as private pay and everybody else is seeing, the cost of medical service continues to go up, and Missouri Consolidated is seeing that just like everybody else. So then I think we can skip to page 114. This is workers' compensation. This is $3.4 million. This is the cost of increase, we think, of state workers' compensation claims that the state has to pay for our employees. Again, I think you're seeing the same thing you saw with MCHCP. The cost of medical services is just continue to go up, and so the cost of these workers' comp claims continue to go up. Page 116 is some additional information about our workers' comp claims. Page 119, this is the other funds part of the workers' compensation one. The way the House bill's set up, instead of being able to do it all in one line, there's a separate line for the non-GR portion of what we pay for workers' comp, and so that's what this is. Page 121, now we get into the Department of Ag. This is some additional spending for our veterinary diagnostic laboratory system. There was some fee funds that they're able to spend, and this is going to get them some additional equipment and testing supplies. Now we are in public safety. This is just a transfer from the economic distress zone to general revenue. This fund is no longer used, and there's $60,000 sitting in there, and so we're just trying to clean that up and put that money back in general revenue and close this fund out. Page 125, so this is World Cup. Again, this is one of the items that we need appropriation authority very quickly because the federal government has told us that they have, there's going to be $59 million that they are going to, they're telling us they're going to send to us on or about January 30th. By the federal bill, we then have 45 days to transfer 100% of that money to the host organizing committee, which for Kansas City is KC 2026. So that's around May 15th that we then have to be able to, by federal rule, get this money to KC 2026. If you look on page 126 there towards the bottom, it shows the breakdown of this. There's $59 million of that transfer money, And then there's $14 million of federal money that is for drone safety with the World Cup. But again, we will be able to use some of this going forward for other issues. But this is to help ensure that there are no issues with drones and safety at the World Cup. Page 128, this is some additional funding for our child physical abuse forensic exams. Unfortunately, we're seeing more of these exams being performed, and so we need some additional money because the state pays for those exams. Page 130 is a fuel and utilities increase for the highway patrol of $200,000. Page 132 is just a correction to the fringe lines. The highway patrol has fringe in their own budget. Almost all the other fringes in House Bill 5. We just needed to true up some of these lines and move some of the funding around a little bit. But this is just a correction on the fringe amounts. Page 135, this is a transfer to the Veterans Home of $2.7 million. This is just based on increased adult use marijuana revenues. We were relatively conservative in our estimate of what that would bring in, and it's bringing in a little bit more than we thought, so this is increasing that transfer. Page 137, as you may remember, over the last couple of years, we have purchased a warehouse in Jefferson City, and what we're in the process of trying to do is collapse state leases for other warehouse space, especially in the mid-Missouri area, and move those items into the warehouse we own. Ultimately, that'll be a cost savings for us. This is $400,000 to help move SEMA out of their current warehouse into the new warehouse. This is the DMAT team, which is the team that provides medical response and that to disaster. So there's a lot of specialized equipment here. You can't just throw it in the back of a pickup and move it. So we have some specialized moving expenses here that we're asking costs for. Next one, $830 million. This is the federal disaster money. There's also a $30 million state match. We do think that we've been told by the federal government that they are going to be here quickly sending us about $300 million that was spent during COVID by hospitals and other things, and this will be reimbursing them for those costs. So we want to be able to get that money out as quickly as possible, and also SEMA gives us 30 days to turn that money around when they send it. So we need the appropriation authority. We're not asking for an E in the supplemental. We'll ask for an E in the FY27 budget, but we're asking for some additional authority because there are still 51 other disasters open, and we don't know exactly when the feds will send us money for those disasters, so we want to be able to receive that money and then send it back out to the local governments or others that actually spent the money during the disaster. So we're asking for $830 million here. Again, in the FY27 budget, this is the other items, so there will only be two items that we're asking for one of these estimated appropriations on in the budget. Tax refunds, which we have to pay, and federal disaster funding. And we would only ask for it on the federal part of this, not on the general revenue part. But we have very short turnaround times, and we want to make sure that we get this money out to the people who've already spent it. All right, the next one is $86 million for tornado disaster relief in St. Louis. We talked about this a little bit when I did the overview. Senate Bill 1 provided $100 million of spending authority. Right now, we think we are going to spend $186 million to help with the cleanup of that disaster. That breaks down basically of $156 million of a project with SEMA for demolition and debris removal. We will get 75% reimbursed on that, but we have to pay the money up front. The feds have changed the way they do disaster funding. They used to pay up front, and then we'd come in with our 25% sort of on the end. Now we pay up front, and they reimburse us. So all the money has to go through our budget, so we need spending authority for all of it, even if we're getting reimbursed for it. So the $186 million that we're going to spend is made up of $156 million of this project with FEMA, which we'll get 75% back. we spent 10 million right away, right after the disaster happened, right after Senate Bill 1 was passed. The city has asked us if we would provide them $10 million to do cleanup and projects that are outside the scope of what FEMA will cover. We've agreed to that. We are working with the city on a spend plan on that. When I receive that spend plan and it's all finalized, I will share that with this committee, but right now don't know exactly what that is, but I do know it is some additional cleanup on things that aren't necessarily eligible for FEMA. And then we put $10 million in sort of as a contingency for things that may pop up that we don't know about.
Senator Bay?
Yes, ma'am.
So Dan, so of that 100 million, has any of it been spent?
We've spent 10 million. Unfortunately, the biggest piece is this $156 million. And what is sort of delaying that a little bit, and I want to say here publicly, the city has been a great partner to work with. I mean, they've been really good. We've had nothing but good experiences working with them. But I think what maybe we didn't quite fully appreciate is for us to go onto somebody's property and either knock down a house that's halfway already blown over or clean up the debris, we have to have that property owner sign a right of entry that allows us, and FEMA won't allow us to do anything until we have that right of entry on the property. Because you can't, even if something's fallen down, we can't just go on there and tear it down and take it away if we don't get permission from that property owner. And it's been a little bit more of a challenge finding those people. The city is the one that is doing that. They have contracted with a company called Tetra Techs to sort of do that, be the boots on the ground and try to do that. But there are a lot of, unfortunately, properties in that area where it's been somewhat difficult to find the people that own the property. Like I said, I think the city's doing a great job. They're putting a lot of resources into doing it, but that is sort of what's going on right now. It's just something that I'm not sure we totally foresaw, but it's something that by law we have to do. And if we don't do it, FEMA won't reimburse us.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing. Like I said, we did around $10 million sort of immediately. Part of why the city asked us for $10 million outside of that is because they want to get started on some other stuff, and we agreed to that. I will also say that you may see sometime later in session a governor's amendment on this because FEMA is also working on a second project. Don't know the scope of that yet. Which is why we don't have anything in the budget, to do additional debris removal beyond the $156 million. That would also be 75% reimbursed by FEMA. So we may have a governor's amendment coming saying we need more spending authority to do that second debris removal project. But at this point, FEMA is still going through all the properties and figuring out which ones would be eligible for that one too. We're trying to do this as quickly as we can. But there are certain things like that right of entry that you just have to do before you can really get started.
Yeah, and so with that, I guess that would probably be a city question because it is still a lot of debris and things in the areas. How do we deal with, individuals or whatever that, the communities, reimbursement or however they do that? That's probably a city question. That's already removed some of the debris.
Yes, ma'am. The state is involved with these big debris removal projects. The city's doing a lot of other things, and so unfortunately I don't know the details on all those. But yes, that's probably a question for the city.
Okay, very good.
Page 145. So this is just the first one was the transfer from GR into the fund. This is the spending authority out of the fund for that disaster spending. Page 147, we're now in the Department of Corrections. This is additional costs for fuel and utilities for the Department of Corrections. Page 149 is additional food costs for the Department of Corrections. On page 151, you can see some additional information on that. Page 152, this is an increase in our offender health care contract of $7.1 million. Page 154 is some additional detail on that. Page 155, this was just in the bill, the FTE number got somehow got off, and so this is just correcting it to the right FTE number in the bill. So this is just a technical correction. Page 157, now we're into the Department of Mental Health. This is part of their overtime spend. Back in the, I think it was early 2000s, the General Assembly passed a bill saying that the state, that our state employees could request payment in lieu of compensatory comp time off, basically. When they did that, since it was a specific thing, they basically said, we want to make sure we can see that this is being paid, so they put it in the supplemental so it was more visible. So every year since then in the supplemental, you have this overtime line. Page
I
one-
think with that, Dan, yeah, the idea, a little bit before me, was to try to see what those trends are, what direction we're going with that. There have been things we hope we positively impacted on overtime, but I want the department to tell me, ask them to say, yes, it's going in the right direction. No, anything that we've done in the last 4 or 5 years to try to help with overtime has made any impact. And of course, Val, I want you to say, oh, Rusty, it's gotten so much better and it's going downhill is what the answer I'm wanting, but I think we probably better get the real answer, and maybe that's what it is.
So we are at fewer hours of overtime this year than we were at last year at this point in time, so that's good. We are seeing our vacancy, actually, they were, oh, am I not on? I'm just not close enough. Okay, so I'm going to show you that paper. I don't have that in front of me right now, but our vacancy numbers were down. They are kind of back up again. I don't watch vacancy as closely as I watch turnover, and our turnover numbers have gone down, but it's like 1 to 2%. It's not like 10 or 15%. So if I'm turning over positions every 3 months, then those are not staff that walk on a floor and work immediately, obviously. So that is still probably the area we're focusing the most on at this point is turnover. We're working on some recruitment stuff. We are going to consolidate recruitment in the department, centralize it because our facilities are just not skilled recruiters. So we're going to centralize what they're doing and hopefully try to build up some recruitment capacity. But I mean, we ebb and flow. I can't say it's more like a straight line that's high than a line that's going down. But our overtime hours are currently down. Like 10, but they're down.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's the story, right?
that's the story.
And not story, that's the
That's
facts.
our reality,
That's the
yeah.
facts. Yeah, what is that old show we watch? Dragnet? That's the facts. All right.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Some of you are laughing, don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay.
I think it was in black and white. I remember it, so.
Did you?
Yeah.
That was the last TV that we had sometime in the early 70s, and Dad decided we weren't going to replace it till he got caught watching Gunsmoke at my uncle's. Okay, go ahead.
Page 160. This is some federal funds for crisis counseling to do with the disasters we had in the state. So this is funding to provide crisis counselors to go into those areas. Page 163. This is increased medication costs for our state behavioral health facilities. Page 166, this is utilization cost increases. If you turn to page 167, it shows there in the middle what those utilization costs are. The Division of Behavioral Health utilization cost is about 26 million, with 13 million of that being GR. That is for various things: youth, outpatient, competency restoration, substance use treatment, et cetera. This also includes $36 million for the developmental disabilities utilization increase, $36 million, $1.36 million general revenue.
Okay, Dan, before you walk off.
Yes.
And this may be as good for other people listening, but opioid funds people look at as an opportunity to spend money. So the state and your recommendation, this falls in the category that we feel safe spending opioid funds on according to the settlement, correct?
Yes, there's a very sort of narrow band. You know, you can't use opioid funds to treat alcohol abuse. You know, it has to be an opioid addiction. But a lot, you know, our substance use providers treat opioid addiction every day, so we can use it there. One thing I will say about the opioid settlement fund overall for the whole budget, not for here, that was in our current FY26 budget. That was over appropriated. There's more appropriation out of that than there are actual cash in it. So you will see as we go through our FY26 budget where we did have to decrease some of the places where we're spending that to get that back in line.
Okay, I have a question, follow that up. Was that my side of this bench over appropriating in that, or was that at your table and a bad guesstimate of what the opioid is, and maybe by looks of your face, you don't want to answer that on microphone and come to my office and tell me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, page 169 is, this is some additional funding for safety and security at our state-operated behavioral health facilities. The people we are treating in those facilities generally are people who've committed serious crimes, and because of that, there are some security issues there, and so we do want to do some security upgrades. This would be like cameras, key cards, some things like that, possibly some armed patrols. Page 171, this is an internship program. This was done through the University of Missouri St. Louis and Cardinal Glennon. They are still going to do it, but we are just going to administer it for them. So they are giving us this money to do it, so this is a net zero for the state, but we do get to keep that internship program going, which is helpful for us. Page 174, we are now in Department of Health and Senior Services. This is our what's commonly known as our in-home program. This is a supplemental for that. $9 million general revenue, $118 million total. This is increased utilization, both increased in the number of services authorized in like 15-minute units. So we're seeing both an increase in the amount of 15-minute units that people need, and then we are also seeing an increase in the number of people coming on the program. But this is significantly cheaper than if those people had to go into a nursing home and we paid for them there. And I think, honestly, more important than that, I think most people are more happy if they can stay in their home, and so if we can give them some supports here, I think it's a win-win on both sides. But it is an expensive program, and we are seeing a cost increase here.
Okay, well, I thought your butt was going to be, with one T, was going to be that those are leveling off, but you see this continually. The department sees this continually increasing, correct?
I don't know
Is
if
that what
there's-
I heard?
I don't know if there's somebody here from the department that can talk about the trend on this.
Somebody just come in and say
I
that.
think
It's
we've got
not that,
the director here.
Yes, we do anticipate in seeing these numbers increase. The age of Missourians, we just released the 10-year master plan on aging, and it talks about the aging population in Missouri and also those adults with disabilities. And so by 2030 will be the first time where our aged population, 60 and older, or those with a disability, are paced on par with our younger population. And then by 2034, we will see that older population exceed that of our younger population for the first time in our Missouri history. So we do anticipate needing to provide these services on a larger scale. As Dan mentioned, it is more cost-effective to try to keep people in their homes with the supports and services needed versus long-term care facility residents.
thank you.
Okay. That takes us then to page 176, $2.6 million. This is money from the Civil Monetary Penalty Fund. So this is funds if there's a civil penalty for a nursing home. We're taking this money to try to help the nursing homes with a staffing campaign to help them better staff up and have better staffing ratios. So we're going to take this money from the fines and try to help them figure out a way to get more staff into all these nursing homes so that hopefully some of the issues there, are taken care of. Page 178. This is a non-count. This is just trying to align our IT spend within social services in the correct places. Page 183. This is just a fund correction. This is just receipts and disbursements, and so we.
Did I miss 181? Was I not caught up with you?
I'm sorry, I might have missed it.
No.
That is just some additional information about the IT stuff on that I talked about in the item
Okay.
before. So I apologize for skipping that tab, though, Mr. Chairman. The next one is just some fund corrections. You can see there some of the federal funds that we need to move money around into to make sure all the money's in the right place. 183 is just some additional information on that. Page 184, county detention payments. We are seeing a increase in county participation, so we need additional funding in this section. Page 186, this is an additional staffing request. This is due to the federal HR 1. Previous to HR 1, the federal government required us to do eligibility renewals for Medicaid recipients once every 12 months. Under HR 1, this will change now to every 6 months, so we are asking for some money to contract with additional staff to make sure that we get that done.
Is there a time frame in here on when these contracts will be done? I'm sorry, I haven't looked at it. Let's see.
Well, I think one of the reasons we have this in the supplemental is we want to get moving on getting this contract bid and all that so that we can then hopefully have people available to do this very close to the beginning of the fiscal year. But if we wait till, we can't put a bid out on a contract if we don't have an appropriation for it. So this allows us to get that appropriation going quicker so that hopefully we can have somebody in right around the beginning of the fiscal year. You can see on 187, it talks about sort of what we're looking at here. This is 60 contracted staff. Yeah,
It's supposed to help with the backlog
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
those things, right? Do I
Yes.
remember that correctly?
yes.
Okay.
The next one is some additional implementation money for the implementation of HR 1. This does include $100 million of federal funding for rural health transformation. We want to have some ability to spend that money in this current fiscal year, depending on how the federal guidelines come out and at what the timing is on that. You will see that we are asking for $216 million in the FY27 budget, but here in the supplemental, we are asking for $100 million. If you go to page 191,
Okay, committee, I'm going to take off. Senator Hudson's going to take over, so if you have questions, get a hold of him.
and on the tab on page 191 also gives details about some of the other things that we're doing in there. Most of what the other things we're doing in there are IT improvements that we'll need to be able to meet the requirements of HR 1. But again, we want to get those going as quickly as possible so that we can meet those requirements. Page 195, this is in the supplemental most years. This is sort of just a historic anomaly. For whatever reason, way back when, even back in the dark ages before I was with state government, for whatever reason, this federal government decided they wanted the food service money for Fort Leonard Wood to run through our budget. So we sort of just basically pass through money to the food contractor down there. Has to do something with the requirements that the food contractor be under the Randolph-Shepard Act. It has to be a blind vendor, and so for whatever reason, but this is just for increased food costs at Fort Leonard Wood, but we just purely just pass it through. We don't do anything with this. Page 197, this is Qualified Residential Treatment Program. This is $2.3 million for some additional costs dealing with this residential treatment program. One thing I would like to say on this is we have other child welfare sections within the budget, and if we had flexibility between those sections, because they're not, some of those sections aren't spending all the money appropriated to them, and we could flex it to this section, we wouldn't have to come to do a supplemental. We don't always know exactly go to, and then 203 through page 206 shows a little bit more of a detailed breakdown of where these cost increases are coming from. Page 207 is the tobacco settlement. Our tobacco settlement payments are going down. We use the tobacco settlement payments for the state match in our Medicaid program, and so we are going to have to, as those tobacco settlement payments go down, we then have to put GR in to make our state match for the Medicaid program. Page 211. This is just an intergovernmental transfer. Basically what this is we move funds around within our budget to be able to show the feds that this is our match for this program or this program. No new funds, this is just moving money around, and this is a non-count in our budget. Page 214, this is the second part of the security professionals for our state buildings that I talked about earlier in the book. Page 217 is the utility increase for our state facilities that I talked about earlier in the book. Page 220, this is some cost to dispose of some PPE in our warehouse. This is no longer useful or needed, and so we have need to dispose of it. Page 222 is the second part of the parking leases at Fletcher Daniels that I talked about earlier. Page 224 is space for the Attorney General. I think this is 19 people would be moving into the state office building in Chesterfield. 2 years ago, we bought a state office building in Chesterfield. We are in the process of trying to move people out of lease space into that office building. Now, I will say, I know this looks like a large number for that. The space we're moving them into is totally, I don't know what the way to say it, but the space, there's no flooring, there's no HVAC, it's just a sort of a blank space within this office building. So this is not just putting in furniture and that kind of stuff. We've got to go in, build walls, put in ceilings, put in flooring, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that's why this is a little bit bigger cost than I think people would expect to see. Our FMDC folks, unfortunately, who could really give you the details on that, are at the House hearing. If anybody wants more details on that, I can certainly get with them and provide it to the committee at a later date. But that is the supplemental. Again, would like to stress that there's some special circumstances here. World Cup, federal disaster money, getting State Road Fund Authority to MoDOT that we would like to supplemental pass by March 15th. You know, that's a little more aggressive than normal. I will say, it was pretty commonplace for the supplemental to be passed before spring break. And so I don't think we have anything in here that's really outside the normal course of business that would give anybody pause about trying to move this quicker. But if there are any questions or anything on that, I'm happy to either answer them now or come to your offices to discuss it with you personally.
All right. All right. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Any further questions from the committee? If not, I will announce that our next hearing is going to be next Tuesday at 8:15 a.m., and that will be the Department of Mental Health. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Christine Sentinel
Oh, okay.